Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Melanie. This is Adventures in Hostessville, and welcome to episode 15 of the Vintage Magazine Project. Today, we are taking a look at the 1913 Modern Priscilla.
Ba-da-bum, ba-dum-bum, bum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
The article I want to take a look at today is a Dainty Stenciled Parasol. Parasols may be stenciled with much less difficulty than may appear to be the case. They are suggesting that I send into them for this stencil, this flowered pattern, and for just 15 cents, I can get a perforated stencil. If I shell out 25 cents, it will be pre-cut for me. I'm a cheapskate. I'm not gonna buy a stencil at all. I have this cherry blossom stencil that I got from freestencils.com. And for a parasol, I just got this little umbrella at Goodwill. But I do wanna take off this thing because there's nothing dainty about a parasol that has a tag hanging down. Seam ripper. So I thought that the cherry blossom motif would be very appropriate because Japanese style is super popular in the United States at this point. In April 1913, we're exactly 1 year out from when all those cherry trees got delivered to the National Mall, like as a gift from the Japanese people or whatever. Fun fact that I learned while I was researching this, Japan actually sent a batch of like a couple thousand trees in 1910, but by the time they got to America, they were all like infested with bugs and they all had to be burned. And then America had to be like, could you send us some more trees, please? So anyway, Japanese style is very popular. Even within this magazine, there's a recipe for a Japanese filling for salads. You can send in for patterns for kimonos. The soda cracker women, at one point they get completely off the subject of crackers and start talking about how to make Japanese toweling. And just on the next page, after the stencil article, there is this ad for Yamato sanitary napkins for refined women. And you should write for your catalog of Japanese goods so you can buy silk kimonos, bamboo basketry, crepe dress patterns, etc. So it's surprising, with how much America seems to love all things Japanese, that their legislation against actual Japanese people coming to the United States is so lousy that for a very tense week in April of 1913, it seems really likely that Japan might actually declare war. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is trace this stencil onto this thicker paper so that it's a little bit easier to paint with. So in 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act is passed, which makes all the California landowners really happy until they realize, wait a minute, who is going to pick our celery? And this is right around the time that a lot of immigration from Japan has started, and also Hawaii is annexed. So a lot of Japanese immigrants have already gone to Hawaii. Now that the United States has annexed that, it just makes the back and forth a lot easier. So we start getting a lot of Japanese immigrants into California, and unsurprisingly, it doesn't take long for the landowners to be like, wait a minute, now there's too many Japanese people. And they are trying to get the federal government to include Japan in the Chinese Exclusion Act, and the federal government won't do it. There's this treaty from 1897 between Japan and the United States that basically says, we're all cool, right? Like your people can come here and we'll treat them like citizens. Our people can go there, same thing. This is also now right around the time that Plessy v. Ferguson has been passed, so that's separate but equal, right? So they start saying, oh, well, we can separate it. We can at least segregate the schools and stuff because we're not now breaking the treaty. Japan does not see it that way. And they're like, what the heck, America, what's going on? So the president at the time is Teddy Roosevelt. He is very interested in keeping Japan happy. First off, because Japan has just decidedly beaten Russia in the Russo-Japanese War. So obviously they're a force to be reckoned with, and like Roosevelt
doesn't want to poke that bear. And also, he wants to trade with Japan, and he wants to keep navigation around them in the Pacific Ocean. And it is like really the big thing that really gets Japan's goat seems to be this segregating of the schools. But California is still going strong with it. Okay, now I can cut my stencil out, hopefully not cutting off my hand at the same time. Roosevelt's answer to this whole California problem is that he comes up with this gentleman's agreement. They won't issue any more passports for Japanese nationals to come to the continental United States, and in return, America will not segregate the schools, like just basically treat the people who are already here better. And there are exceptions, like as always, if you're rich or you're an important merchant or if your husband is already there or whatever. And it kind of goes okay until the 1912 election. So 1912 is a presidential election year, and Taft is now president, and he's running again. So Roosevelt serves 2 terms, then he's done, and he sort of like handpicks Taft, right? Like, I am finished, but now I present to you Mr. Comfy himself, William Howard Taft. But once Taft starts presidenting, Roosevelt doesn't think he's presidenting right, and he decides to split off from the Republican Party and form his own party. So it's the Progressive Party, which comes to be known as the Bull Moose Party, and he is going to run for president. So in the 1912 election, you've got the incumbent, Taft, running for what would be his second term, Teddy Roosevelt, who's taken a term off, running on a different party to come back for what would be his third term. Then you've got Woodrow Wilson running as a Democrat, and everybody's favorite eternal candidate, Eugene Debs, running on the socialist ticket. But what happens is, what often happens when a party splits like that, is that Roosevelt and Taft kind of split the Republican vote, and that allows Wilson to slide in as president with only like 41% of the popular vote. Teddy Roosevelt's running mate for vice president is Hiram Johnson. Hiram Johnson is the governor of California. So now all bets are off. So Roosevelt's like, now you gotta be cool with Japan, and California's like, we know, yeah, okay. And then Taft comes in and he's like, but you still gotta be cool with Japan, and California's like, we know, we're being cool. And then Wilson comes in and he's like, so, but don't forget, be cool with Japan. And then California's like, shut up, man, we don't have to listen to you. Like, it's the exact same stuff that they've always been sort of saying okay to when it was a president from their party, that now they're like, we don't care. So the California state legislature is heavily Republican at this time. Again, Hiram Johnson is the governor. He's technically now a progressive because he was running with Teddy Roosevelt, but so now nobody wants to listen to Wilson, and they're like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We can't change immigration, that's a federal law, but what we can do is make it impossible for these immigrants to thrive when they get here. And they start drafting what becomes known as the Alien Land Law of 1913. I think that technically it's called the Webb-haney Act. And what it says is that Japanese aliens, so Japanese immigrants, can't own land in the state of California, right? And that's where the majority of these Japanese immigrants is in California and Hawaii, but within the continental United States. Most of them are in California, most of them are working in agriculture. So they're like, if we say you can't own land, that should do the trick. And they say they can lease it, but you can only lease it for a limit of 3 years. So that also, like you can't put down any roots and thrive if you gotta move your farm every 3 years. And additionally, they say, okay, but we know a lot of Japanese people already own land. That's why we're so upset in the first place. There's not a lot we can do about that. If you do own land, you're grandfathered in until you die. Like, that's the rule. Once you die, it's not yours anymore. You can't pass it on to just whoever you want. You have to either sell it back to the state or sell it to somebody white, basically, to a citizen. So this is what they come up with, and they do it fast. Wilson is inaugurated on March 4th of 1913, and the California State Assembly passes this thing on April 16th. By April 17th, Japan has found out about it, and they are furious. All right, well, I did a much smoother job of tracing this than I did of cutting it out, but that's okay because I think I'm actually going to freehand the stems within the pattern with this fabric pen. The only tips that the magazine gives me on what I should use for paint is that I need to be careful to use a thicker paint if I'm using a very thin silk. I'm not. So I'm just gonna use that paint pen for the stems, and then I've got some acrylic here that I can use for the petals. Wow, this is really thick. It's been in my basement for a long time, so I don't know, but I've got some water, maybe? That will. So the magazine says, by fastening one section at a time over the corner of a table, a smooth, flat surface may be obtained over which the cut stencils should be carefully laid and held in place. So I guess I just put a section here. It's kind of smooth, held in place. I bet they wanted me to have tape. Hold on. So on April 16th, like I said, that is when the California State Assembly passes the alien land law. And on April 17th, there is a demonstration in Tokyo of 20,000 protesters demanding that Japan declare war on the United States. This gets back to Washington, and Woodrow Wilson is like, what's going on? What's going on? And so he goes to Hiram Johnson and he's like, what are you doing? Like, you know this, you can't do this. And Johnson's like, no, man, oh, states' rights. So he ends up, Wilson sends out his Secretary of State, who is William Jennings Bryan, who is well known for being a great orator. He goes out and gives a speech. That doesn't work. Wilson's like, I have an idea. How about you put it to the people of California for a vote? Because Wilson thinks, kind of rightly, that it might not be universal, that this is what Californians want. There's a lot of people who like remember the Chinese Exclusion Act and are like, remember how we did that and then we didn't have anyone to pick our celery? And then there's also just a lot of people that are like, whatever, man, there's not that many of them here. The whole point of umbrella fabric is to repel water. Now, if you know anything about presidential history, you know that Wilson is not doing this because he's some sort of like civil rights leader of history. Like, he is in the process at this moment in April 1913 of segregating the United States Postal Service, which was one of the like few like really successfully integrated organizations in the country. But he doesn't want to go to war with Japan, and Japan is on fire. They've got some like naval commander there being like, the fleet is ready. It will not take us long to get to the coast of California, and we are going to protect our nationals that are living there. And again, like Wilson's like, crap, William Jennings Bryan, like, he doesn't know what to do. He's like, can you at least make it sound less racist? Like, it doesn't have to be less racist. Just could you make it sound like it's not about Japanese people, which of course it totally is. But what they end up doing is they change the language. Instead, they say that only citizens or people with the intent to become citizens can own land. But what the language of that law is not recognizing, and purposely so, is that Asian immigrants can't become citizens. So the original naturalization law that comes out in 1790 says that only white people can be citizens. And it gets updated after the Civil War at some point to say, okay, you know, I forget exactly what the language is. It's something like persons of African nativity and aliens from African nations or something like that. But there is no option for Asian people at all. But somehow it's enough to get Japan to call off the dogs of war. And it's honestly, it's not super effective anyway in terms of land ownership, because there are a couple of loopholes. The main one being that if the immigrants do have a child that's born in the United States, they are a citizen and then they can just give their land to their kid. But in 1920, they updated and closed some of those loopholes. And then in 1924, the Johnson-Reed Act is passed. And that is a national immigration law that basically says there are no more Asian immigrants here at all. And that lasts for decades. Okay, here it is, my cherry blossom parasol. I kind of love it. I also think I probably can't take it out in the rain, but as a sunshade, I think it's sort of fetching. So, thank you for joining me on this journey of people's ability to fetishize and revile the exact same thing at the exact same time. If I spin this, it's like I'm in a Broadway musical. So don't forget to hit like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and you can also subscribe on Patreon. Thank you so much, and have a great day.